Well, the people that have their pulpits, have changed a little bit in terms of not using the term China virus. I think people on the street are still referring to it sort of casually, and so the damage has been done.
There is a growing concern over discrimination and attacks against Asian Americans during the COVID-19 crisis. With me now, Richard Mui. He's the board chair of the Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote Michigan Group. It's good to see you again, Richard.
Good to see you, Christy. Thank you.
And also Roland Hwang. He's an attorney and he's also a professor of Asian American history at the University of Michigan. Welcome back, Roland. It's good to see you too.
Good to be back.
You know, we had this conversation about 3 weeks ago. A lot has changed in the country since then, and I want to get perspective from both of you about what you have seen difference, if there's been more incidents reported in that you've heard of, and how you think the conversation has changed. Richard, let me start with you.
Well, it seems to change pretty rapidly. So I think from President Trump, last time we spoke, he had still defended his statements, but he'd walked those back now and stopped calling the Chinese virus. But I think, unfortunately, it seems like the genie's out of the bottle. Maybe not so many incidents around here, not that I've heard of, at least in Southeast Michigan, but around the country, certainly. So that people are still making the association, even in his administration. There was a New York Times article a week or so ago detailing like some people in his administration, like they were pushing to call it the Wuhan virus in the G7 meetings. And so, unfortunately, that strain still seems to be there.
Roland, what have you seen in the last couple of weeks change or not change?
Well, the community, the Asian American community, is getting organized. There are several organizations, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, OCA, which is a national Asian American advocacy organization, AP3Con, ALDEF, Asian American Legal Defense Fund. They're all collaborating on creating a database and reporting numbers and anecdotal information about now 1,500 cases that have occurred just in the last 5 weeks.
And you were talking about really getting an accurate count of incidents. You both were part of a town hall recently in Michigan and being able to try to get the word out. Richard, talk to me a little bit about that and just trying to get people to understand that this is something that, yes, they should be reporting.
Yeah, so the town hall was, it was, I think, probably more of a press conference. So Attorney General Nessel, Senator Chang, and Representative Koopa spoke, as well as Roland and myself. There's media outlets from around the state there, just to get the word out, I think, about the number that they can call, and that the state is collecting data on that, and that certainly if anybody's been exposed to any of the discrimination or the hate, they should call and report that. So just trying to make sure that everyone understands that that's an important part of the puzzle there.
And Roland, I was reading something where someone was quoted saying that people don't want to rock the boat, though, or they say, well, if it's something didn't escalate, someone yelled at me, I'm just gonna let it go. How important is it to be able to document even the comments that are made?
Well, I think it's important to document both the hate incidents, because we know that they occur, and also, if you can, to document things that can be elevated to a hate crime, if you can identify the perpetrators and then furnish the information, time, date, location, that sort of thing. It's important because Department of Civil Rights also tallies incidents as well as acts on investigations and prosecutions. And so it's important to do both, to get an accurate count, and also to try to identify those perpetrators and take action.
It also is something that if there's simmering sentiment, that it doesn't go away within a couple of weeks, or even if someone changes what they call something. Talk to me a little bit, Roland, about what you have seen change in the way people talk about this, the discrimination against Asian Americans, and how it's changing a little bit.
Well, the people that have their pulpits, have changed a little bit in terms of not using the term China virus, but the damage has been done, and I think people on the street are still referring to it sort of casually, and so the damage has been done. A lot of reports have come into us about it happening at places like Boys and Girls Club in Cleveland, in the park in Sunnyvale, California, Moreno Valley, Brandywine Park in Wilmington, Delaware. Just people saying things about coronavirus and anti-Asian epithets. It's disheartening.
You know, I was pointed to an op-ed that Andrew Yang wrote in the Washington Post, and he was a presidential candidate. And he talked about that Asian Americans need to stand up and show their Americanness. And I'm going to read you a quote of what he said, and I want to get both of your perspective on this. He said, "We Asian Americans need to embrace and show our Americanness in a way that we never have before, and, quote, demonstrate we are part of the solution." I want to get your perspective, both of you, on that. Does that put the onus back on an Asian American person that they should be doing more to prove that they are all in this with everyone else? What is your reaction to that? Let me start with you, Richard.
Took a moment to reread the editorial again this morning, and I think unfortunately what he misses, and I think he had the right intention, this idea of Americanness is somehow limited to just our clothing. I know that's the part of the editorial that got all the attention, but he does mention other things, including volunteering and voting and things like that. But that was all consumed by the emphasis on clothing. But I think, I would say I don't think that's ever saved any group ever. So in trying to prove that you are more American, that really falls to the wayside, I think, in times of trouble. And you just have to look back in history, Japanese Americans and volunteering to fight for this nation, they didn't really prevent the rest of their families from being put in internment camps. So, I mean, I think if you could expand, and we should expand that idea of Americanness to mean, filling out your census, voting and organizing, and really participating in the democracy that way, that is how you can help yourself, help your group, and help America, frankly. And I think those things are all good, and, we should focus on doing those as opposed to just, wrapping ourselves in the flag.
Roland, what did you think of that? What was your response?
Well, it's important to recognize organizations in the Asian American community that are doing good things, delivering masks. The Association of Chinese Americans, the Council of Asian Pacific Americans, MI India are all delivering masks to local hospitals, to the Detroit Police Department, Northville Police Department, that sort of thing. And that's just pure good work. But the flip side of it is we don't have to prove our American identity. I mean, we are Asian Americans, but we are Americans. And so there shouldn't be the requirement that we prove our Americanness. I mean, we are part of the fabric of this country. And so it's the issue of being a perpetual foreigner in the eyes of some people. That is a problem, but we are all American. So I think all of the good work is part of the process for trying to identify ourselves as being part of the solution, and people should know that.
Is there anything to any kind of federal guidelines to the Civil Rights Department, anything that should be done on a national level in this kind of situation?
I think it's important for people to recognize that when they hurl racial epithets, that is a hate incident. There's a little bit of education, I think, that has to occur. That is, when people hurl the N-word, that is taken as a racial epithet and not to be said. The same thing is true for all the words that are being hurled against Asian Americans right now because of the coronavirus. It's hateful words with an intent to intimidate a ethnic community in the United States. The intent is there, and so it should be considered a hate incident.
And I think this is an opportunity to build coalitions as well. So certainly this is not the first instance of crimes or hurtful words and things like that. So Roland and I actually were part of a community statement drafted along with AD and the Mexican Consulate of Detroit, API Vote Michigan, and ACA, a local statement, but standing up against this hate. And so it's even though it's directed this time at Asian Americans, next time it could be another group. And I think it's important on the level as well as the national level for the groups to get together and stand against that.
I was just going to say, is this something that you're seeing now? You're talking about even the last 3 weeks, the coordination and the amount of local coordination and group coordination across the state and being able to come together. Do you anticipate, even more or having even more conversations in the next couple of months or so, Roland?
I think that's happening. Andrew Yang joined up with Jonathan Greenblatt of the Anti-Defamation League to have a joint statement against anti-Asian sentiment as well as anti-Semitic sentiment. I think that there's some commonalities in terms of the mindset of the people that are perpetrators of hate speech and hate incidents. And so we see some of those connections just growing among different civil rights organizations.
Richard, what would you say, what would your message be to people in Michigan, Asian Americans who are living here in Michigan and people who are not Asian American? What would you say for them to take into consideration and to account right now?
Well, I would say, again, the enemy it's the coronavirus. It's the COVID-19. It's not Asian Americans. It's not Chinese Americans. And we're all in this together. And I think if we all do our part, that we can help fight the virus. And I think it's with the understanding that if you do see those kind of incidents, that's don't be a bystander. And so there's certainly different ways to intervene. There's been some good online trainings in terms of how not to be a bystander and different things that you can do. And I think that's important for people to call it. No matter who you are, that you identify that and call that out when you see it.
Roland, what would your parting thought be?
I think it's important to take a stand and speak out when you see something or say something. And some of the most important tools that you have are your cell phone with the camera. Certainly, buildings, video cameras are helping document those occurrences that occur on the street. And so we just have to be vigilant and try to identify the problem and act on it.
All right, and we're going to keep checking in with you, Roland Hwang and Richard Mui. Thanks so much for being with me. It's good to see you.
Okay.
Thanks, Christy.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.